Egypt is one of the oldest countries in the world. And when we discuss ancient Egypt, we're talking about a time that spans from an early archaic or Neolithic settlement of the Nile to the Roman conquest in 30 BCE. So that's thousands of years that these people dominated Middle Eastern life. So ancient Egypt has been broken down into several different periods according to rulers and other political and social events that happened during that time. When we discuss art of ancient Egypt, we're going to focus our attention to the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, and including the Amarna period. So one of the sculptures we're going to talk about is the Sphinx. And the Great Pyramids of Giza, bottom left down here in the picture, these were built for three rulers: Khufu, his son Khafre, and then his son Menkaure. We have three men in order. And the Great Sphinx of Giza was built, or what they think, during the rule of Khafre, who was the son of Khufu, the first to build his pyramid at Giza. Okay, so the Sphinx is thought to be his because it's sitting in front of Khafre's tomb, but we're really, not exactly sure who built this great monumental sculpture. So a sphinx is a mythological creature with the head of a human and the body of a lion. It symbolizes a pharaoh as an incarnation of the sun god Ra. So the pharaohs were seen as gods reincarnated on earth. So they were very godlike. And originally, a beard, which was a symbol of the pharaohs, used to hang from the Sphinx's chin. But it has long since fallen away along with the nose. Now, pharaohs in real life, would have worn a chin strap with a false beard. It would have been a leather chin strap, and then they had a false beard on there. This statue has created so much debate among art historians and scholars as to when it was created, who built it, and who was the model for this. Who is this built for? And there aren't any inscriptions on the statue, which only add to that mystery. Another mystery is the statue has received some severe water damage. Well, how could it be if it's in the desert? One theory is that the area was once covered in grass and it turned into a desert, but that was around 10,000 to 5,000 BCE. But that causes a problem. That would mean that the statue is much older than archaeologists have thought. Much, much older. Another theory is that it could have possibly been a flooding from the Nile. There's all different types of theories as to why that there's water damage, but there is water damage to the sculpture. Now, it was buried under sand for many centuries, almost all the way up to the chin. The entire Sphinx, though, was dug out in about 1925. So I have some photos of that process. So here is some. So it's at this point, it's kind of buried up to the chest. But before, it was buried almost up to where the chin would have been. Now, let's talk about the nose. So there is a legend that places the blame of the nose disappearing on Napoleon and his French campaign when they went to Egypt, which would have been about the beginning of the 19th century, so the 1800s. And it was said that a cannonball was shot at the Sphinx. It took the tip of the nose off. However, I have my own idea of what happened. So another statue from this is a what I would call a high relief. Now it looks like a freestanding, but you can see something behind it holding it up. So that's why I consider this a high relief. And as was custom, many burial tombs had statues honoring the pharaohs. So the pharaoh would actually commission somebody to sculpt and create life-size statues to continue their legacy for all time. And this statue was commissioned by the pharaoh Menkaure. He was the last to have his pyramid built in Giza. And he was the son of Khafra, the grandson of Khufu. And this statue was discovered with Menkaure's tomb. So the statue depicts the pharaoh and a queen, and it's just a little bit under life size. Both are standing in what is known as the Egyptian pose, which is very stiff. They look very, very stiff, not natural, very blocky, not clearly defined. One foot is facing forward, but yet they're very motionless. There's not a lot going on there. They're stagnant. And Menkaure is very military-like, with his left foot forward, but his hands are at his side, and it appears that he's holding two cylinder objects in his hands. Now, he is sculpted to fit the Egyptians' idea of athleticism and youthfulism. So why do you think it was important for a pharaoh to look athletic or youthful? What kind of message is Menkaure making by standing in such a way? Well, he wants to show strength. First of all, being young, being youthful, you have your strength. And secondly, he's powerful. He looks like he's in the military. Again, showing strength. Now, his standard royal dress, the headdress that he's wearing, that's known as a nemes, and it was a headdress worn by the pharaoh. He's wearing a rectangular false beard, and you can kind of see some strapping around his chin. And it's got a leather strapping, not a real leather strapping, but it would have been a leather strapping, and it tied underneath the nemes, which is that headdress. And his chest is bare. He is wearing a distinct kilt called the shenjet, worn only by pharaohs. And in his hands, he is actually holding the deed to Egypt, which was thought to be the pharaoh's possession. So let's talk about the queen. So his queen is standing very similar to him, but her step, if you look forward, is a little bit smaller than his. Why do you think that would be? His is more forward, hers is a little bit further back. Because she is not as powerful as he is. And her clothing is very sheer, it's see-through. And the reason why this is done is to kind of accentuate and show her feminine curves. She's wearing a wig, with her natural hair just kind of peeking out underneath that. She is making an embracing gesture towards the pharaoh. Her left hand is resting at the pharaoh's arm, and her right hand wraps around to his chest. It is a way to unify things. It's a message of strength. Is a message of dependence. Is she or is she not dependent on the pharaoh for her position in society? So she's stand by your man. And, that's her message here that she's showing. Now, if you look at this, you can kind of see around the pharaoh, around his face, around the ears, you can see a red tint. And that's traces of a red pigment there have been found on the pharaoh's face and neck, which suggests that the sculpture would have been painted. Now, unusual for a pharaoh's image, the king has no protective cobra perching on his brow, above his head, where his nemes is. It's unusual for a pharaoh's image of the king to not have a protective cobra and vulture perched on his brow. And this noticeable absence in this has led to the suggestion that both the king's nemes and the queen's wig were originally covered in precious metal, and that the cobra and vulture would have been part of that addition. The cobra and vulture are symbolic of Egypt, and they represent the unified Egypt of a lower and upper Egypt together. Now the statue is very blocky, and this was common for Egyptian sculpture. They relied on a back pillar and the avoidance of negative space to support their sculptures. So if you look in between the pharaoh's, arms, you can see that that negative space has not been removed. Even in the queen, you can see in between the arms that space has not been removed yet because they don't know how to at this time how to properly, um, uh, you know, get balance with this. Okay, so we haven't figured out how the human form, balances, and it really won't be until the Greeks who perfect this until that happens. So this artist leaves support for areas, in between, even in the false beard that you can see, right here. So in between this area, you can see that they've left that negative space. Same thing down in between the sides. We've kept that in there because we just don't know how to remove it without other pieces breaking off. So here are some images, and you can see here is that back pillar that is supporting them. So this is why I consider this a high relief. This is a high relief statue. And here's some other photos of that Egyptian pose. Now, when you passed away, the Egyptian culture believed you had a spirit, a ka, and this was your afterlife. So you really wanted to, provide for your ka, your spirit, and have, a pleasant living quarters for eternity. So wealthy families would often have their tombs, the walls and the ceilings adorned with paintings and reliefs. So this is a low relief in a mastaba, which would have been a flat top tomb. Most of these decorations were symbolic of the previous life for which the tomb is created. They were either religious or they were showing past times, things that people enjoyed to do. And this is an example of such wall decoration. This is a low relief from the tomb of Tai, who was a government official. So the relief in this mastaba, again a flat top tomb, was of an important official named Tai. And can you guess which figure is Tai? The focus is on Tai. He is that larger image. He towers above the rest. Why do you think that is? He's illustrated this way to show power, to make him godlike. And the hunters are less superior than Tai, and therefore they hold less importance in this piece of art. So the main purpose is that the focus is to be on Tai, but it also illustrates the power to maintain order and balance. He was a government official. So notice, as he's not doing the work, he is just supervising the hunt. Now look at that pose. It's very flat. His face is in profile. Okay. The sides, we're looking at the side of his face. So, but however, his body is twisted. It's posed as if we're looking in the front. The artist that created this shows the river as if it was sliced in half and opened up so that you could see what was going on underneath the water, as well as what's going on above. So the animals are shown in profile so that you can identify what they are, and they're fish, crocodiles, and of course the hippopotamus. So one of the most unusual rulers in the history of ancient Egypt was Amenhotep IV, who came to the throne in about 1352 BCE. Now he served as ruler for 17 years. And he did some crazy things to Egyptian culture. He changed the traditions and he challenged, the Egyptians to their very roots. We're talking about hundreds, thousands of years that things did not change, that this was the way culture was and the beliefs were, and he just flipped it on its rear. So the first thing that he did was he changed his name. So Amenhotep, in this name you can see the name Amen, which is Amen, Amen, and that is Amen was the important god during the New Kingdom, and this is kind of when he took to the throne. So he felt that Aten, Aten, the sun disk god, was the most important god. And so he changed his name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten, one who worships the Aten. Okay, so he changed his name to Akhenaten. And Akhenaten, he founded a new religion. So he said, we're no longer going to honor many gods, polytheistic. We're going to be monotheistic. We're going to take one God, and we're going to honor this one God who is Aten, the sun disk god. Now, most Egyptians were uncomfortable with this. Again, this is something that had been set within their culture for hundreds of thousands of years. So this was crazy for them. And, a lot of them were not willing to give up their other gods and goddesses. Another thing he did was Thebes was the capital city with temples to so many gods and goddesses, especially Amen. And Akhenaten said, no, we're not going to worship him anymore. We're going to worship Aten. So we got to start a new city. So he picked up and he moved the capital to a city in the north of Thebes, and he built temples with art dedicated only to Aten. And the city was called Tel El Armana, the city of Aten. Again, the last thing that he did was he changed the way that art was created. He changed the look. Okay, if you remember all the things that we've looked at before, they were semi-realistic looking. Look at these sculptures, Menkera and his queen. They were, they had a look to them. And, during this time, this Armana art, it had been consistent before it for 3,000 years. And then he says, no. We're going to change the way that it looks. So the majority of art, again, was used to only glorify gods or to brag about Pharaoh's military accomplishments or to prepare you for afterlife. That was the focus of art. The Pharaoh would always be seen as very muscular, very strong, but this was not the case for the Amarna art. Instead, the Pharaoh would be shown in a more relaxed pose, okay, perhaps with his family. All right, the figures, they became more elongated, such as their neck or their heads. Their lips and ears would have been enlarged. And look at the stomach. Does that person look very military-like? He's very relaxed. There's a curvilinear line there. Military, you think straight lines, clean straight lines, and you're looking at this. There's a very more relaxed pose. He's got a gut on him. It's just over exaggerated and more, I guess, realistic in a sense. So here is a sunken relief from the Amarna period. And this one is called Akhenaten and his family. And this would have been an altar in a home. So this would have been found in a home. This is just a sanctuary or something that was dedicated to the Pharaoh. The key to this new style of art is that the Pharaoh makes him and his wife the only representatives of Aten on earth. Nothing else represents them. They are Aten. Which really kind of upset a lot of people, a lot of the priesthoods of Egypt, by making him and his wife the only ones with access to this new god. So, again, talking about that rectangular form, that boxy form that used to look like, now look at this style, much more curvilinear. And Akhenaten's role, his wife was Nefertiti, whom he loved very dearly. There's so many poems from Akhenaten to his wife Nefertiti, and they've survived. And they just reveal how much he really did love her. And this relief shows the pharaoh and queen Nefertiti playing with their 3 daughters. The children are nude and they have shaved heads, which was custom of the time. Now, Akhenaten urges his artist to portray the royal family in a very informal position. Why would he do that? Why do you think he would do that? He was trying to display a new openness, a feeling of we are like you. Okay, again, these are the pharaohs were representations of gods, or in this case, a god on earth. And so they were kind of set differently from the people. They were kind of untouchables. And now he's saying his message to his people are, no, 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 no. We are just like you. So the royal couple are receiving the blessing of Aten, the sun disk god. So if you look above, you see that circular disc up there with the cobra in it. That is to represent Aten. And then you can see the little rays coming from Aten are actually rays of hands. They're reaching to the nostrils because they are representing that they are taking in the breath of life. And the king and queen are sitting on nice little cushioned thrones. And if you look at the base of the queen's throne, it's adorned with little plants. You can see those little things sticking up. And that's just to symbolize a unified Egypt. Now, there has been so many speculations about this. And sometimes there's these goofy things that are said that these are aliens on Earth. They're always trying to do the alien thing with Egypt. Transformers did it pretty well with the pyramids and stuff. They're always doing this. It's just because of this style of art during this time. Here's another example of Amarna art, and this is the bust of Nefertiti, one of my most favorite pieces of art from the Egyptian era. And this is a bust, which is in the round, and this is actually, it was not in a tomb or anything like this. This was a model found at the artist studio of this. So this would have probably been a representation and other things that have been built off of it. So a bust is a sculptured portrait that consists of the head, neck, and a part of the shoulder. And they were very rare in Egyptian art, or especially during the New Kingdom art. And again, this one was found in the studio of Tutmos, who made this. Now, the beauty of this bust comes from the artistic, dramatic use of color. The colors in her headdress, they also are represented in the jewelry that sits up on her neck. The eyes were made from polished quartz, but the left eye is missing. And this is because most likely, this again was a model. Other sculptures would have been created off of this. So it's trying to kind of show how the process was created. So in the other eye, we have a wax. Now, forever people thought that maybe somebody had stolen the eye or it had fallen out and they had lost it. But think about this. If a thief was coming and they found this, wouldn't they take both eyes instead of just taking one? And this is a very symmetrical looking art piece. The coloration on it is actually plaster. So it has a limestone base, but then plaster was added to the exterior. And that's how we get this smooth, makeup-like look on her skin. It's so nice and smooth. You would not have really been able to do that with the limestone because it's more of a chunky type stone. So they've put this plaster on there and then painted it on there, and it gives it more of a realistic look. And it also, it's very based on a triangle. If you look at the top part of her names, her headdress, as it narrows, even the accentuation of her neck gives us that nice geometric triangle shape. Very symmetrical looking design. Now, who is the most famous Egyptian pharaoh that you can think of? King Tut. Now, Tutankhamun was actually the son of Akhenaten, or formerly known as Amenhotep. So soon after Tutankhamun came to the throne, the Amarna period ended. Okay, now he was very young when he came to the throne, and I think he ruled for 10 years, and he had a lot of you know other important officials who did a lot of the talking and a lot of the governing, if you will. And so they said once his father passed, let's get rid of this craziness. Let's get rid of this idea of only having one God. Let's bring our gods back. Let's move the city back to Thebes. Let's get rid of that weird art style. Don't know what that was. Let's get rid of it. And so that's really what happened once his son came to the throne. And I'm asked often, was Nefertiti Tutankhamun's mother? And the answer is no. So it was custom for pharaohs to have multiple wives. They had their main wife, who would have been Nefertiti. She would have been the public wife, and then he had several others. And it is true that his father, Akhenaton, had relations with his sisters. There is one account that he did have 2 children with one of his sisters, but both of those children either had futile deaths, that they died at a young age, or they died as a fetus. And so there were other speculations of who his mother would have been, but it was within relationship to the father. It would have been either a first cousin. Even Nefertiti, I think, was a possible first cousin. It was custom too to they wanted to keep the bloodline clean, so they kept within their family, which is funny because it actually does quite the opposite. And so it was known that Tutankhamun had some physical disabilities. I think he had a club foot. He had a kind of a messed up jaw and some messed up teeth because of the incest within his family. And so he didn't live to a very old age. In fact, I think he was about 19 years old when he finally passed. And so this is his death mask. This was found inside of his sarcophagus, found on the mummy itself. And the sarcophagus was built inside of a box, All right, and this was discovered in, I think, about 1922. They discovered the tomb, and it took about 3 years later until they finally discovered the golden funeral death mask. Now this is in the round, and it's cast from a liquid gold. It also has semi-precious stones and other glass inlaid into it. So the funerary mask is about 22 pounds of gold, semi-precious stones, and glass. It's only one of 2 golden funeral masks that we have. There were probably others, but they would have been looted by tomb robbers. And this funeral mask depicts the traditional nemes, the headdress. If you remember, the nemes again is that striped headdress worn by the pharaohs. And this one has the vulture and the cobra on his head. So again, they're representing a united lower and upper Egypt. And together they protect Tutankhamun. Now his beard mimics the false beard that a pharaoh would have worn. And, they would have secured that false beard right behind the ears into the names. So his beard, again, is considered to be sacred to the gods, and therefore represents a closeness he has to the gods. On the back, you will see a spell in hieroglyphics, and that's just a protective spell. All right, that is a brief introduction to ancient Egyptian sculpture.